Please stand. Please stand. Please stand. Please stand.
And we're in person, so it's kind of nice to see you all, see your smiling faces. We're now at the section of the agenda for public discussion and comments on agenda items. Please refer to the regulations regarding discussion and comments. Mr. McCoy, do we have anybody for agenda items?
You have nobody signed up on agenda items, ma'am.
Thank you. So we're going to move on to our interim superintendent, Mr. Forget.
Thank you, Madam President. This evening we have two presentations to share with you. As we load up, our first presentation is a conversation with regards to the proposed budget for fiscal year 23. We have prepared for you function code items, similar to what we've done in previous years. It's been the practice of the board to review any changes between this year and next year, plus or minus 10%. So if you wouldn't mind, Madam President, you could engage in a conversation with me around each of those particular areas. And we can start with code 1010.
Board members, are you ready? It's on the agenda. Do you have it, Ms. Green? I think Mr. McCoy is coming. Okay, everybody ready? Everybody with me? We're going to start with code 1010, and that's general support. Are there any questions on any of those items? Mr. Stridine, I know you got your hand up.
Thank you, Madam President. So the fourth item on 1010 is BOE BOCES. Could someone explain what that $30,000 is for?
Absolutely. Mr. Stritter, and that is to pay the external monitoring officer, Dr. Jager from Putnam Northern Westchester BOCES. Last year, that was paid out of a different code. This year, it's paid out of the board's budget instead of the superintendent's budget. So it's just a shift from contract services from one function code to the next. So that's why you see that as a new cost for the board, because they directly respond to the board.
Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to move on to code 1010, and that is, 1040, and that's the district clerk. No, I go all the way down these. Okay. Anybody have any questions on 1040? We're going to move on to code 1060, district meeting. All right, I'm going to keep moving. We're going to go to code 1240, chief school administrator. Questions? Mr. Stridine.
So I have a question on the first line. It's $248,000 additional expense. Could someone explain what that's for?
That is to cut. I'm sorry, Mr. Stritter. That's to cover the cost of the settlement agreement that was made by the board.
So this is only for this upcoming year, 12 months, $248,000. So I would suggest that the board find $248,000 for teaching assistants at the K through 2 level to show support for our students in the classroom rather than for a payout. Can that be done?
We'll take that into consideration. Thank you, Mr. Stritter.
Are there any other questions on that item? We're going to move on to item 1310, business administration. That does not have a plus or minus 10. Go ahead, sir.
I might have missed it, but does chief school administrator, is that only the like top 3 or 4 people as far as salaries, or who does that include?
That would be the superintendent, the deputy superintendent, and the support staff within the superintendent's office.
So director of communications would be in that group?
I believe the director of communications is in a different line under, I'd have to look specifically that up. It's not in this.
Is it on tonight's list?
The director.
The directors would be on next board meeting? Thank you.
Anybody else questions? I think we have a little reverb here. Thank you. Because I keep hearing myself echoing. I hope it's not in my head. We're going to move on to code 1320, and that's auditing. Any questions on auditing? We'll move to 1325, the district treasurer. Questions? We're going to 1330, tax collector. Anybody questions? Okay, 1335, purchasing. Questions? Can I move to 1420, legal? No questions? 14, yes, sir.
So as far as the attorney's fees, this is primarily just for Shaw, Purcell, May, and Lambert, is that correct? And not including other lawyers that defend the district versus lawsuits or other items?
The other law firms are through the insurer, otherwise we're litigating for the district.
So are there ever times during the last year that the district incurred expenses for attorneys other than for Shaw, Person, May, and Lambert?
I don't think so.
Would that be in this item, or would that be in something else?
There have been some external investigators, and I'm not sure whether that has been coded under 1420. I'll have to defer to others in administration.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to continue, thank you. We're going to go to 1430 personnel. Any questions on that item, on those items? Okay, we're going to move on to 1480. Go ahead, Mrs.
I'm
Stratton,
sorry.
sorry. You're on.
The miscellaneous contractual expense, 410,000. What items does that cover?
Mr. McLemore, Ms. Peterson?
So the miscellaneous contract expense in 1430 can be a combination of HR programming, whether it's our software systems that are incurred with that, as well as other expenses with recruit front or OLAS jobs, those office fees that are associated with them.
Would it be possible for the board to get a breakdown of that item for the next board meeting? Thank you.
Sure, thank you. We're going to move on to item 1480, and that is, yes. Any questions on that one? Mr. Levinstein, sorry.
So 1480, and I'm just using this one, but it's a general question going forward. And I just want to pick custodial salaries, and I'm not picking on them, but I see that we have an increase there. So I'm wondering, though.
You're on the one before that. We're on the one before that.
Oh,
We're on
I'm sorry.
1480. So just hang on one
I'll
second.
hang on.
Okay. Anybody else on 1480, which is public information and services? Okay. Now we're going to go to 1620, operation of the plant. Go ahead, Mr. Levinstein.
Hi, thank you. So using custodial salaries as a figure here, we have a figure and then we're increasing it. Is it possible to understand how, on all these salary lines, how many FTEs we have this year versus next year, what we're planning for? So, in other words, we're going up 112,000. And again, I'm just using this line. I have nothing against the custodial staff. I would like to see it all around. Do we know, is there a decrease of 1? Is there an increase of 3? I mean, those are not here. That information is not here at all.
Thank you, Mr. Levinstein. So, yes, we can get you that information, but also remember that we've used some of the federal stimulus funds to increase the number of custodians that we have in the district. So we can get you that information.
I understand, and I'm okay with what direction you're going with here. I'm not, but I would just like to know, I think the board should know that we're increasing or decreasing, and by just seeing a total dollar figure, we don't know.
We're more than happy to get you all of that information.
Thank you.
Because what I was going to say to you is, there's an increase in addition to this that we're using federal funding for. Remember, this is only for general funding. So we're using the CURSA funds, we've used the CARES Act, and we're also using our. So there's additional positions beyond this. But okay. Mr. Velez, if you want to respond.
Yeah, Mr. Levinstein, we're adding 4 custodial positions. They're going to be paid through federal funds. There's 2 for the new program in Sacred Heart and 2 additional floaters to help us during the day when people call out sick.
Well, that's important to know. We're also, you know.
Yes, Mr. Stridiron.
So regarding security, at some point last year, there was supposed to be an assessment done by an outside company of the security in the district and where the vulnerabilities were, what the proposal was for placement of cameras and the door alarms and all that stuff. Has that been finished? And how does that affect this budget? Because I still see security contractual. Is that for 19,000? Is that Snoop's security? Are we planning on still hiring private security for next year?
We are not intending to hire private security for next year unless we get into a situation where it's warranted for the safety of the individuals within this district. But there is no intention to hire an outside agency to come in and do the work that our employees do. But I will defer to Ms. Peterson to give you an update on the security assessment. We won't share very much of that in public as that is confidential information, but we'll give you an update as to where we are. And I believe that that is funding that we're using through another federal or state source. Ms. Peterson?
So currently, Matt Tyndall, our Director of Security, is working along with the security firm to tour and walk our buildings and do the assessment and start the planning. We're currently setting up the funding from our Smart Schools Bond Act that was ordered to us through the New York State government to cover that work during the summertime. So our hope is that we will be able to use the assessments and any quotes that were given previously that we're adjusting to submit to the state for approval. So we can get the different things that you're talking about, cameras, door alarms and different things. Mr. Velez has worked along with the buildings to make sure that they're secure, and especially some of those access points in Maine and some of our middle schools and North Campus to make sure we do have those alarms as a temporary safety measure, but we're looking for more permanent work to be done over the summer.
Yeah, Mr. Straight-Iron, so that's in reference to your request for the outside vendor to come in and do the assessment. We also have a really strong partnership right now with the Orange County Sheriff's Department. The Orange County Sheriff's Department is coming in and doing site assessments in most of our buildings. They're working their way through. As they finish the assessment, they're giving us the results of it, and then we're sitting down debriefing with the principals and addressing the findings from those particular assessments. So Mr. Velez right now, working with Mr. Tyndall, are pretty much, I think we've pretty much covered most of the areas where we needed to address at the main campus. Is that correct, Mr. Velez?
Yes, Mr. Foyer, we finished the main campus, NFA North and NFA South, and those are the schools that we're installing extra alarms in the door for safety and security. The Sheriff's Department spend hours in our buildings. I know in South we spend 4 hours, and we assess from the main entrance to the back entrance, every door, every access, every alarm in the system, in the school, to make sure that the schools are safe, and if a student decides to leave by a door inside of the building, we get an alarm, so we know when the doors are open in the building. And right now, we installed 30 alarms in NFA indoors, and we're going to install 20 at North, and we ordered 22 for South. The ones for South are not here yet.
Go ahead, Mr. Stradone.
What happens when an alarm goes off at the high school? Do you know exactly what door it is, and what's the response?
You want to
Currently, we would know if someone was within earshot of that alarm. Long term, the safety plan that we have the funding for will be installed where a motion detector kicks off on everyone's alert, whether it's on their computer or on their iPhone or on the security surveillance system. But right now, it's within earshot of the alarm. It's a stopgap measure for the long term that we're trying to get done.
Do you have another question? Yeah, I do. Go ahead.
So this budget, you feel, covers all the security personnel that's needed at the schools, or you'll have a better idea once all the assessments are done? So this budget may have to change, or are we going to use the SMART bond money for personnel? Can we use it for personnel?
Ms. Peterson.
So after the assessments are done and reviewed by building leaders here, if there is a recommendation, we do have money within ARP if we have to allocate that, but we really need the assessments from the team and also in collaboration with the vendors that we're using to assess if there is a need for more positions. We have hired security monitors under some of the CURSA money, but there may be a need to utilize ARP funds for that, and we are investigating that now.
Thank you. Anybody else questions on that code? We're going to move on to code 1621, and that's maintenance of the plant. Are there any questions on that code? Go ahead, Mr. Stridarn.
Just have a question on supplies, reduction of 55,000. Where did that number come from? Was it an assessment done from the building level, or was it the district level? How did they determine supply levels? Because the prices of everything are increased. So this is actually much bigger reduction than we should actually be increasing for supplies, unless we have something that we never used.
Oh, I wouldn't say that, but I would say that we're using other sources to cover these expenses, such as the federal stimulus. Mr. Velez, do you want to give a little bit more information?
Yes, Mr. Ford. Also, Mr. Triano, we bought a lot of supplies through COVID supplies, and we have in the warehouse supplies like we talked in past board meetings of all the supplies that we bought that we have not used yet. So we want to use what we have in stock before we buy more.
Anyone else? Questions on that code? We're going to move on to code 1670, and that's central printing and mailing. Questions? Okay, we'll move on to code 1680, central data processing. Questions? Go ahead, Mr. Sternard.
So how is the Wi-Fi holding up at the buildings? Is it still strong, or do we need to increase that?
Ms. Peterson?
So as a part of our E-rate program, we are installing access points throughout the district. It's been an ongoing program that we've had for the past 3 summers. We plan to continue that work. It is a grant that is reimbursable, so we're excited that we're almost nearing the end and completion of that project. About 3 years ago, we extended the Wi-Fi, the bandwidth in our district, so we feel very strongly and thankful to the board for supporting the infrastructure of technology in the district.
Anyone else? Questions on that item? We're going to move on to code 1910, unallocated insurance. No questions? Okay. Code 1920, school association dues. Move on to 1930, judgment and claims. Okay. 1950, assessments on school property. And the last function is 1964, which was a good year, I can tell you that it was. Refunds on real property tax. And that's our budget roundup for tonight. We'll do the rest next meeting.
Thank you, Madam President. My second item would be an energy performance capital project update from Mr. Ramjug.
that side or this one? I'm just looking for that initial slide. Oh, there it is. Thank you. So in our capital bond, as you may be aware, we have we've gone out to bid previously with both Heritage and Valesgate, and as a result of our inflationary environment, our current inflationary environment, which appears to be sustaining, both of those bids came in substantially higher than expected. So we went back to the drawing board, we value engineered while preserving the original goals of installing air conditioning and indoor air quality, as well as the additions on both of these schools. And we now have those addendums up to the State Department of Education. And it's anticipated that they've been up there since February. Being that they're addendums, they're anticipated to take about 4 to 5 weeks. So we're anticipating that they'll be approved in the near future, and then we'll be prepared to go back out for bid. Having experienced that setback, we took a deeper dive into our prepared plans for New Windsor Elementary School, as well as our new facility, the Career and Tech Education Center. And while we had relative balanced budgets for the scopes of work, at that time, we weren't accommodating the inflationary increase, which, again, doesn't seem to be going away. So we're also currently value engineering those two scopes with the goal of preventing what happened prior with going out to bid. We're right in the throes of that right now. So as soon as that's completed, we'll be pulling all the information together and bringing it back to the full board for presentation. It's going well. We're finding ways to reduce costs while still preserving the instructional environments. That's our goal. So before we move on to the energy performance contract piece, does anyone have any questions about where we are with the capital work?
Board members, I see Mr. Stridiron has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Ramjug, for the presentation. I do have a question on the CTE building. What percentage or dollar amount over budget is it based on the inflation?
So the amount of the budget, including contingencies, is approximately $70 million. Based on the budget calculations that were done, we're now at $77 million. So we have to close. That's a gap that we have to close.
And what items do you think could be taken out? I mean, $7 million is a lot of money to pull out of a project. Can you reduce the size of the parking areas? Can you save money in that sense, or has to be the building itself?
We were presented a substantial size list from our construction manager as well as our architect, along with anticipated costs for those items. There's some bigger ticket items, and we're just in the throes of looking at those now to determine what the best strategy is, as well as having an eye towards moving forward. In other words, if we deferred certain work at this time, could we do it in the future? So there's an eye towards still preserving the building in its current context, primarily because it's already fully designed. So if we for the scopes of work that we decide to reduce, we are going to have to weather more design, therefore perhaps more delays, and we're trying to avoid that or minimize that as much as possible.
Any other questions, board members? Thank you.
Okay, so on the energy performance contract, this work has been going on since 2018. It's about $28 million worth of work, and 100% is paid for through energy savings. So we have currently Mr. David Newman that's going to take us through that, and he is presenting remotely from Long Island, I believe.
Yes, thank you, Roger. Okay. Roger, do you need me to put up the presentation and then walk through it?
Hello, David.
Good evening.
I'll ask you that infamous question. Are you muted?
I am not. Can you not hear me?
We just need a little volume, please, Jim.
Can you hear me now?
Perfect. Yes.
Okay.
Just let me know when you want me to change the slide.
Okay. Unfortunately, I can't. Just the way the video is, it's hard for me to see it. So if you just kind of tell me what slide you're on, I can work from that. I assume you're on the cover.
Correct.
Okay. If you go to slide. Okay.
Can you hear that, David?
You're a little. Okay. You're a little hard to hear, Roger.
You're not the first person to say that.
Okay, you're perfect now. Okay, we're on slide one. What I'd like to just go over is a little recap, history of the project, where it started, and there's actually been some changes along the way. And we'll go over those changes and how the project has evolved over the last 2 years. On this first slide is actually the original contract, and what I'm showing is the energy performance contract is an energy saving measure project where the savings from the measures are used to really fund or pay for the project. And as part of that, the project spans really touches every building in the district. What we have on this slide is really the items that were done substantially across the entire district. And those major items were lighting conversion. Pretty much substantially every light bulb, interior and exterior, converted to low wattage LED and long life LED lighting. Building envelope sealing across the entire district. So what that really means is weather stripping of doors and windows, sealing up of gaps in the roof wall joints and on the roofs and walls and windows. Heating and pipe valve insulation, so bare heating pipe throughout the district being properly wrapped in insulation. Many of your buildings are steam heated buildings. So there are devices called steam traps that capture the steam to make sure they don't race through the system and that the heat is properly let off into the building. Those were placed substantially across all your steam facilities. Heat rejecting window film is just an application that's put on windows where there's a tremendous amount of solar gain, or very sunny, like south side facing parts of buildings where the rooms tend to get hot because of sun. This helps to reject that heat, particularly in the spring and summer months. Motor replacements, kitchen hood exhaust controls, which in kitchen areas where you have the high volume exhaust hoods for cooking when they are not cooking, and make sure that those hoods are shut down or reduced, so you're not sucking heated air out of the buildings at times when you don't need to. Computer power management, which is making sure that all the computers and PCs throughout the district are shut down during off hours and not sitting with a screensaver and wasting energy when they're not needed. Water conservation, which is really just low flow, mostly low flow aerators on wash sinks to reduce the use of hot water when washing hands, is mostly what that measure is. Vending machine controllers is actually a small measure, but there's quite a few of them around the district where we make sure that the units are actually not running in off hours when no one is looking to use them. Unit ventilator refurbishment, so the unit vents in classrooms and throughout the district, making sure that the dampers work, the motors work, the filters are clean, and that all the actuation and operation of them are correct. Plug load controllers is really just shutting down copiers and small electronic devices throughout the district that will sit idle and draw energy at times when no one is using them. Boiler furnace AC compressor controllers is a similar measure. They're small devices that make sure that air conditioning units, or rooftop units and air handlers, boilers, are not short cycling or cycling on and off unnecessarily. They're a small automated device that predicts the runtime based on the heat or cooling need in the building and reduces the amount of times they turn on and off, which is actually a big source of power draw every time you have to kick them on or kick them off. So these devices actually save quite a bit of energy by optimizing that. Go ahead to the next slide, Roger, please.
There you go.
Okay, thank you. This is the facility-specific measures that were in the original contract. We did boiler and burner replacements at NFA and the South Middle School. Extensive window and door replacements at NFA and the public library. With the public library, really the entire shell of the building was replaced. The original project called for close to 1.05 megawatts of solar across many buildings: NFA, NFA North, South Middle School, Meadow Hill, Temple Hill, Fostertown, Gardner Towns, Horizons, and the public library have all had solar installed. And we also did an electric to gas condensing gas boiler conversion and a new chiller at the public library. So the public library originally was electrically heated. We actually got rid of the electric resistance heating and converted to a gas condensing, high efficiency gas condensing boiler, which is a much lower cost way to heat that building. Okay, next slide, please.
Go for it.
Okay. So there have been a few changes in the project since its initial inception. One of the initial ones was due to a change in use at the Washington Street pre-K building. The decision was made to remove the existing energy work at that building. That actually freed up some capital monies from the project, and the decision was made to actually expand the energy management control or temperature control systems in the building, where originally we were going to expand your existing Andover system. The decision was made to actually go to a state-of-the-art modern Johnson Controls Facility Explorer fully digital system. This is a fully open protocol system, all digital and electronic, and it's really the state-of-the-art as far as controls. That is a comprehensive, complete conversion for the entire district to one unified modern system to control the temperature in all the buildings and all the classrooms. Okay, next slide, please.
All set, Dave.
Okay, thank you. Furthering this, there was actually Amendment 3 and Amendment 4. Amendment 3 and Amendment 4 are actually the same. Amendment 3 was the original change of scope. Amendment 4 was minor adjustments that were required following re-review by the New York State Education Department. Since there was substantial changes, it did have to go through the State Ed Department for code review, in addition to the original permit. The main driver for this change order really was the fourth bullet down, fifth bullet, where when we went to implement, we had cogeneration or combined heat and power systems originally planned for NFA, Heritage, Meadow Hill, and Temple Hill, which is a system that is an electric generator that fires on natural gas, and when you use the waste heat to heat the building in addition to generating your own power, by doing it in combination, you can actually produce the power lower cost than the utility can provide it. Unfortunately, there was a regulatory change while we were waiting in state ed for permitting, where you're no longer allowed to have cogeneration systems and solar PV systems wired to the same meter, which unfortunately is how these were designed originally, because the buildings only have one meter. So what that would mean is if had we gone ahead and installed the cogen systems, the utility would not reimburse us for the generation of the cogen in addition to the solar PV. So it basically ruined the economics. So what we did is we went back to the drawing board. We worked with Roger quite a bit to kind of decide how to move forward with this. And what we came up with was an alternate set of scope. which is really delineated here. Some of the biggest things we did was the fourth floor library was was outfitted with this old fiberboard ductwork in the ceiling on the fourth floor. It's basically stapled and taped together, and it had really failed and was really extremely leaky, and the majority of the air in the building was not even going to the space, but being blown up above the ceiling and being wasted. So we designed a complete replacement of that ductwork and return ductwork with all new metal ductwork, new controls, and because we had to basically pull the ceilings down to replace all that ductwork, all new drop ceilings and LED lighting was installed in its place to really rehabilitate the fourth floor space. We added some time clocks to the exterior lighting. This guarantees that all the parking lot and field lighting will turn off at a certain time once it's not needed in the evening. There was a steam condensate receiver, just a component of the steam system that was failing at NFA North that we were able to fit in. We did brand new chillers, AC chillers at Temple Hill and Meadow Hill schools. Those will be installed this coming spring. I mentioned the cogen. And with the cogen falling out, we were also able to basically outfit it with an additional amount of about 616 kilowatts of solar across an additional set of buildings, Heritage, Meadow Hill, Temple Hill, Gams, Gardner Town, and New Windsor. That brought up the total installed capacity for the district to 1.67 megawatts, which is one of the largest installations in New York State school. It's quite substantial. Okay. Next slide, please.
Go ahead.
Okay. So,
energy saving slide, David.
am I on the total installed solar by building?
Now you are, yes.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. This is really a breakdown of what solar is installed at which building with these actual kilowatt capacity installed at each location to show how we come up to the 1.67 megawatts. And to the right is really just, I took a construction photo. This is actually the solar that's currently installed at the BOE library on the roof. And you can actually see the new cooling tower that was installed just to the left in the house there to the left. Okay. So, Roger, if you go on to the next slide.
All set.
Okay. Just some project highlights of the economic benefits of the project. The year one energy and operational cost savings associated with all this work is just shy of $1.5 million. It reflects over the total term of the project, which is an 18-year term per the New York State statutes rules, is a total of $33.2 million over the entire term of the project. The project has, because of all the solar, because of all the energy upgrades that were done, we were able to affect a $1.2 million total utility rebate eligibility for all the measures in the project, so quite substantial. And in addition to this, an EPC is NYSCD aid eligible, facility aid eligible. In the case of this project, you're eligible for upwards of $15.7 million paid over a 15-year term, since it is considered a reconstruction project. Okay. So that's really the overall summary of the project and its economics. And, I'm very happy I had to have the opportunity to kind of give you the update and the overview of the project itself.
Thank you, David. Any questions?
Board members, any questions? Oof. Mr. Levinstein?
Thank you, Madam President. So, firstly, I think it's great that these upgrades are paid for by energy savings, but I have a couple of questions, Mr. Ramchuk. So, firstly, when did this start? How many years ago did this start, approximately?
The work started in, can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
The work started in May of 2018.
Okay. So I just have a question. It's listed that there's a new boiler and burner. They were replaced at South Middle School, and new controls. Is that true? Is there a new heating system there in South?
No, there is a new control system throughout the building. But in anticipation of the future capital project, that boiler was not replaced.
Okay, because that's what I saw on the screen, so that's what I was wondering, so.
The ones at NFA were, there are 2 new boilers at NFA.
Yeah, I do
Okay.
apologize.
Thank you.
That was actually changed as part of one of the amendments.
Board members, any other questions or comments? Thank you, Mr. Ramjug. Thank you,
very much,
sir.
folks.
Thank you, Madam President. That concludes my items.
Thank you, Mr. Forget. We're going to move on to board committees. We're going to start with the Policy Committee. Mr. Howard.
Thank you, Madam President. Policy Committee met on March 10th, and we had a conversation around policy number 4531, which is coming before the board this evening. Thank you. That was the only conversation at the meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Howard. We're going to move on to the Library Committee. Mr. Stridiron.
Thank you, Madam President. We discussed the upcoming budget. We had the construction update, discussion on Workforce Development Summit that happened right here at the library. We had the annual report and strategic plan. The new website for the library launched on March 1st. It's also good for your cell phone now, too, so you can see it on your cell phone. Discussion on security cameras, COVID tests distribution, and the digital navigators.
Thank you, Mr. Stridiron. We're going to move on to the Personnel Committee. All of the items that were discussed at the Personnel Committee are here on the agenda for tonight's meeting. I'm going to move to Buildings and Grounds Committee. Mr. Levinstein.
Thank you, Madam President. So the Building and Grounds Committee met on March 15th, and the committee discussed the facility use requests, which is Resolution 7.1 on tonight's finance agenda. The committee also discussed with Mr. Velez, Fostertown School windows, West Street painting, district painting schedule going forward, midwinter brake repairs, the Building and Grounds gasoline budget, no surprise to discuss that, NFA window replacement, facility use request fees, Sacred Heart School building update, and Newburgh Armory update. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Levinstein. We're now up to my section, and we're going to talk about the superintendent search. So I'd like to introduce our contact people with the superintendent search. Our consultants, Dr. Monica Brown, who's here today, and Mr. Ed McCormick. Is Mr. McCormick here? Yes, right here. Hi, Mr. McCormick. Welcome. And they're here today to give us an update on our search.
Test. Green. Okay. You all can hear me?
I'll turn it up a little bit. All right, and that's the clicker for the...
Okay. I see. Okay. Well, thank you all for having us here this evening. And on behalf of all of us at HYA, I just want to thank all of you on the board and all of the stakeholder groups, interviews, constituents who spoke with us over the last few weeks to talk to us a little bit about the district, what's expected in a new superintendent, so that we can recruit and bring to the board some candidates who will be a good fit for the district. So we do appreciate all the time and effort that was given. A special thank you to Matthew McCoy, who helped set up all the meetings. That was not an easy feat. We had a lot of groups to meet with. And again, Matthew, thank you for your patience in getting everyone together, but it did help bring together a great report. Our leadership profile is what we have put together to share with prospective candidates as far as the some background on the search or on the position and on the district. So we start our leadership profile that I know the board has had with some background on the district. And then we try to succinctly summarize from all of our interactions the strengths of the district, the challenges that the district are facing, and some overall desired characteristics in a new superintendent. Once we discuss this tonight, if there's general consensus from the board members, we will then use this information in our advertising and recruiting. Would you like to do the strengths? Do you want me to keep going? Okay. So I won't read to you, but in general, the strengths of the district as cited through the many groups that we met with and on the survey, some of the major strengths were diversity. We saw that your district, your stakeholders are very proud of the diversity in the district and all types of diversity. Whether that be racial diversity, socioeconomic diversity, that this is something about which many in the district are very proud. It's also a unique situation here in Newburgh due to the enlarged school district that you have both urban and suburban parts of your district, and this will be something that we will be looking at as far as experience from candidates who are applying, that they have experience in all areas. And I apologize, this isn't a great way to look at this. So again, I will just summarize. In addition, we found that in addition to your community being very strong, in general, the stakeholders are very supportive of the schools. Community is described as resilient and that they value education and that they're strong in that support of the schools. You have a staff that's described as committed to continuing to improve the system and the educational experience for students. Another great strength of your district, as cited in many of the focus groups that we talked to, were the opportunities that were available to your students here in Newburgh. Whether it's AP courses, CTE programs, all of the different programs that you are offered here. In fact, so many people discussed the fact that your students don't need to leave the district to be involved in many of the programs that really across New York State would be housed more at the county level. In addition, your commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion as a district, and that commitment to improving student achievement through the lens of equity was seen as a strength. As far as the challenges are concerned, equity issues, it seems, still need to remain on the front burner for the new superintendent, especially with regards to how resources are allocated across the district. Student achievement is an area of where continued improvement is needed. And the climate in the schools, as described by many of the staff members as far as teacher morale, there was a general desire to limit the number of curricular or instructional initiatives. The term that I had not heard coined before, but I will give your staff credit, is called, or they called it, initiative fatigue over the past few years. And so I believe that the new superintendent is really going to need to prioritize those initiatives and be very strategic in which programs are implemented with the proper training, focus, et cetera, in order to make all of them successful. Okay, moving on to the desired characteristics, unless there are any questions so far.
Board members, do you have any questions?
Okay, so our desired characteristics, this is the one-page document we use for recruiting. So you will see it is aspirational as far as finding one person who can meet all these. Mr. Forget is laughing because it is very difficult to be all things to all people as a superintendent, but what we've tried to do is really consolidate the themes that we've heard in our discussions with you, the board, and with the focus groups. So we believe that you need an experienced leader. This is not the place to begin your career in education, even if you have executive leadership. Collaborative and transformational. So again, I will not read to you, and these on ours are actually in bullet points. I'm not quite sure why they didn't show up in bullet points here for the presentation. But you would like, or we would like to see and recruit a student-centered visionary, someone who understands the needs of a diverse student population and who understands the need to meet more than simply the academic needs. Someone who understands how to prioritize curricular initiatives, as I talked about earlier, and implement instructional practices that meet the needs of students without overwhelming the staff. Someone who will continue to focus on equity and inclusion and student achievement, regardless of situation for the students. And someone who can develop an educational climate or environment that promotes learning and collaboration across the district. Someone who inspires trust and is approachable. These are the terms that we heard. Who is humble, who is professional. Again, we heard a lot about collaboration and bringing all parts of the community together. A consensus builder and an instructional leader, or a leader who is demonstrates integrity, empathy, humility, and compassion. Someone who's a motivator and is actually inspires others to, especially at the central office and at the building level leadership teams, because the need for accountability and those teams working together to demonstrate accountability for students across the district is very much needed. Someone who's a great communicator and who can communicate regularly and effectively by engaging and valuing input from stakeholders. We do hear, and we hear this in many districts, that stakeholder groups not only like to be invited to meetings, but they also like their suggestions to be heard by the new superintendent. Someone who will also foster that sense of community by establishing a shared vision and really bringing, we did hear from your staff that they want to be a part of creating that shared vision, and they don't mind being held accountable, but they'd like to know for what metrics they will be held accountable. They'd like someone who is visible, active, and engaged in the district and the community, someone who wants to be a part of the community and wants to get to know the different people and groups.
Just a good evening, everyone. Again, just a couple of comments on back to the focus groups that we looked at, and I wanted to emphasize one thing, and just one thing. It has to do with trust. It was a pervasive word used throughout the district. And I'm going to give you a second word. As I said, I was only going to do one. But I wanted to tell you that part of the characteristics, people were telling us they needed someone that had an alpha personality, be male or female, someone who could stay the course, take the criticism from all of the units, from all of the segments of the community, be collaborative, but set a vision, stay the course, and not be deterred by criticisms or things that they may hear from outside of the organization. As long as there was collaboration and involvement, then they thought that the person would have to, if the person could do that, then they could be successful. And that is a function of trust that becomes if there was one word that I heard in almost every group that I talked to, it was talking about trust between the district and the community, between unions within the district, between black, white, There was trust and for whatever reason, lack of communications, lack of trust. But certainly, it's a pervasive term, and we don't use it lightly. And the person is going to have to be strong enough to bring everyone together, develop a course that people can buy into, and engender trust through as you move forward over the next 2-3 years.
Okay. One additional thing that I'd like to let you know, just to give you an update, we don't start formal recruiting until you hear the leadership profile and desired characteristics and give us the general consensus of a go-ahead. But already we have 22 applications started for the position. Of those 22, 5 are sitting superintendents, and we will begin formal recruiting with this material if we get the general consensus to do so tomorrow.
First, board members, any questions? Yes, Mr. Stradine.
Can you provide the public with, from this point on, what they're going to see from their point of view regarding the superintendent search? What interaction will they have in the process, or will they see anything other than at the end they're going to see someone named superintendent?
The search itself is divided into 3 parts, as we've talked about. The community engagement part was during this session where we got community input, and that becomes a section in which there will be mostly input from the community. The second phase is we will go away once you approve the criteria and do the recruiting, reviewing, and that piece of it. When we come back, we'll be in the evaluation phase where you do the interviews. Now, there are a couple of things that could happen at that point. It depends on the board or how they want to interact and involve the community. There are a number of models that we can suggest to you. Some we feel are better than others. But in very broad terms, the community is at the beginning. The board exercises authority and its responsibility at the end.
Board members, any other questions? I'm going to now have Mr. McCoy poll the board on whether or not we will accept this document to go forward. Mr. McCoy?
Ms. Burton? Yes. Ms. Green?
Yes.
Dr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Levenstein?
Yes.
Ms. Maida?
Yes.
Ms. Beneo?
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Thank you. And thank you, Dr. Brown and Mr. McCormick. Nice to see you both.
Thank you.
It's nice to see you all in person, too.
We're going to move on to item 5.2, which is a resolution to adopt the policy on the first read, 5411. I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Yes, Mr. Stradine.
So I know the last time we had the discussion, there was concern about a few of the items in the actual policy. What has actually changed from the time we had it last meeting to now?
Ms. Peterson?
So at the recommendation of the board, we did provide a brief presentation on what has changed and what has remained the same within the policy. So we can just scroll to the next slide.
We're just waiting on technology. Hang on a second.
Okay. So for the bulk of 5411, there is no changes to some of the rules that are initiated from the State Athletic Association. So the student must be enrolled for 15 consecutive days. They must participate in 3 courses along with PE and be passing the physical education requirement by the state. They must maintain an 85% daily attendance rate, and the district, we felt that it was important to be 5% higher than what the state requirement was. They have to have earned a minimum of 4.5 credits in their study from the previous year. During our work with Dr. Yeager, what the district saw was that postseason academics were not where we needed them to be for our students to successfully complete and graduate and go beyond the academy field. So we felt it was important to put in the credit requirement. And the students must also behaviorally meet the expectation in terms of their daily interactions in school with their peers and with their teachers. And at any time, if they're not adhering to any of these things, they can be suspended from the participation in the extracurricular activity.
Does that help, Mr. Stradiron? Oh, there's more. Wait a minute. Sorry,
Okay.
I interrupted.
So in order to appeal, based on the pandemic, we had a certain set of rules that would allow a student to appeal. And as we're coming out of the pandemic, we want to make it clear to all of our students what that appeal criteria is for 5411. We still feel important that that there is an 85% attendance rate. We know that being in school leads to academic achievement and successful completion of courses. So students must still have that 85% in order to appeal for 5411. We also understand that students do have some learning difficulties, and sometimes they're not always successful in reaching their 3.5 credits. So in order to be considered for an appeal, the student has to have earned a minimum of 3.5 credits for the prior year, but they also have to participate in some type of academic support. May that be ESYP or any other of the many academic programs that the district offers. If they're still unsuccessful, we understand that some of our students do have learning difficulties. They'll have a right to appeal that, but we encourage our students to participate in the many academic support programs to get to that 4.5.
Yes, sir.
So this is the same as what we had 2 weeks ago. I think 3.5 credits was in there from 2 weeks ago.
Mr. Forget.
Yeah, the 3.5 is the criteria to be considered for an appeal.
Yes.
It's not the policy. The policy is 4.5 credits.
But still, no matter what, as long as you have 3.5 credits and you have 85% attendance, which is 27 absences in a year,
Correct.
you can still qualify for extracurricular activities if the appeal is granted.
If you participated in the academic enrichment and support programs that were offered throughout the year. If I'm not achieving throughout the year, I have to take advantage of the course offer, the credit recovery, the after-school programs, all of those different things throughout the year in order for me to be considered for an appeal.
What exactly is participating mean? Does it mean
Attending?
just basically attending? So if you, just hear me out.
Sure.
If you really want to do these credits, you want to get 3.5 credits, you can say, okay, I'll do 3.5 credits. I'll go to the after-school programs. I'll go to the summer program. You don't have to achieve anything. You just have to go. Right? According to this, you just have to go. Where is the, you got to do? Besides going, you got to do. I want to see do. Because 4.5 credits is a 5-year program. You're in the 5-year program. 3.5 credits, you're over 6 years. I mean, 21 years old, graduate from high school.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't see this as education. This is participation in social. This is about social events. The whole this whole eligibility policy is about social. It's about music, art. Why can't we have higher standards? I don't even like it 85% attendance, but I understand there are certain situations where as long as it's excused, But still, that's a lot. I mean, how many, that's 27 excused absences, right? Does that include tardies? What effect does being late to class every day have? There's not in this policy at all, is it?
I believe it goes into the calculation of average daily attendance, the number of minutes per participation in the day's activities of the school, which generates the calculation for your average daily attendance, which would play into the 85% determination. So I guess from my perspective, this is a learning policy. This is focused on learning. I believe that the minimum attendance rate is 85%. I struggle with that's 27 days as well. I want students in school 100% of the time, but I do understand that there are circumstances that are out of our control and they're unable to attend. So a high standard for attendance really should be there. 85% is still 5% higher than the New York State Public High School Athletic Association. So we are setting the bar a little bit higher than that. But I also understand that there are students who really do need a little bit extra time in order to pass those courses in order to graduate. And setting a 4.5 credit expectation, obviously we want every student to achieve that, and we have to work as hard as we can as a team to make sure that those kids achieve that. But those students that don't, that attempt to try to overcome the barriers that they're faced, and attend those after-school sessions and attend those summer school sessions and still are confronted with the barriers that prevented their success, we don't want to lose those students. So by offering them an opportunity to participate in extracurricular or after-school interscholastic athletics is one way to keep them engaged and connected so that we can address the learning needs as well. That was the purpose by which we created this policy. So I understand we want a high bar for everyone, but we have to differentiate that based on the needs and the barriers presenting to these students.
I understand the need to keep kids interested in school, but there's got to be other ways than to basically say just show up. I mean, this is not a learning policy. To me, this is a participation policy. What are you learning by having 7 credits after 2 years of high school? I mean, you said you have to have 3 regular courses and a PE. Regular means anything but PE, right? Why can't we have, it should be, I think it has to be more about not just showing up, but you actually have to show that you're really committed to learning. And I think this policy misses that. I'm sorry to see this policy. I would prefer it just to not, I like the first page. And I do believe there should be appeals, but based on other things, not 3.5 credits. Thank you.
Mr. Levinstein.
Thank you. So I just want to just clarify. I think I'm asking, is the due part that Mr. Stridarn is looking for, is that the appeal contract that's made that the student must adhere to, and which he is overseen, and he or she needs to do the work to keep that contract up to date and whatever was stipulated in there?
I would have to ask Mr. Stridarn what he meant.
Well,
means passing.
I'm asking that question, though. What I'm saying is all of this will allowing an appeal, it creates an appeal contract, correct? Where the student, the family, the principal, the teachers say, this is what you need to do. So it's not a matter of just, the contract may not say you need to show up for summer school. The contract could say you need to pass X amount of class. So the contract can be written where it is a due part, what you're looking for, I believe.
So, yes, that's the intention of the contract, but what I heard was Mr. Stridarn's concern was that prior to even getting to the contract, he was wanting an engagement component built in. because it's not just attending the after-school program, it's actively participation in that class to begin to engage with the learning, is what I heard from Mr. Stridiron, but I totally understand what you're saying. The criteria by which we would consider an appeal and the integrity by which we create that contract and we hold to that contract and we monitor that contract for the student's success based on learning is exactly the intention of the appeal.
Mr. Howard, you had your hand up before?
I just wanted to speak to the fact that I understand the intention of the policy and understanding that we have a district of a wide range of learners in our district. And I think for anyone to sit here, and I'm not talking about anyone specifically, but to think that we would put a policy together just for kids to show up, that's not what the intention is here. But believe me when I tell you, showing up sometimes gets the kid across the academy field. Showing up gets the kid engaged where he normally would not have been engaged. And I think that this policy allows for opportunities for kids that may be struggling but are putting the effort out there to have that appeal process available to them. So I was going to ask, we've heard it, everybody's had their sides and see how they feel about this. I was going to call the question, Madam President.
Thank you. The question has been called, so we're going to do a roll call.
Policy 5411, Ms. Green.
When you call the question, there are no more comments.
Dr. Henderson? Ms. Green? Yes. Dr. Henderson?
No.
Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Mr. Levenstein? Yes. Ms. Maida?
Yes.
Ms. Mineo?
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron?
No.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Ms. Burton?
Yeah, mine was showing up too.
I saw that, but Mr. Howard had the floor, and he called the question.
Ms. Burton?
Abstain.
That item passes.
Thank you. We're going to move on to our Assistant Superintendent for Exceptional Learners, Mr. Baer.
Thank you, Madam President. The Exceptional Learner Division has one item for the board's consideration. There are committees of the CSE and CPSC.
I'd like to entertain a motion, please.
Second.
Questions or discussion? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Dr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mr. Howard? Mr. Levenstein? Ms. Maida? Ms. Mineo?
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Ms. Burton?
Yes.
Ms. Green?
Mr. Baer, would you like to talk about the COVID tests in the back?
Sure. So the Newburgh District has been provided a robust number of home test kits. We are more than happy to share with the community. To the back, I put some on the table earlier today. There's some behind some of the visitors today. There's also a box in the back. I'd be happy to take more out. You are welcome to as many as you would like. We definitely have more than enough to spare, and we encourage you to use them and use them well. And that concludes my items.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Baer. We're going to move on to our Assistant Superintendent for Finance, Mr. Goldbeck.
Thank you, Madam President. Tonight we're presenting item 7.1 as a consent item for your consideration.
I'd like to entertain a motion, please. Questions or discussion on this item? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Howard? Mr. Levenstein?
Yes.
Ms. Maida? Ms. Mineo?
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Ms. Burton?
Yes.
Ms. Green?
Yes.
Dr. Henderson?
Yes.
Thank you, Madam President. That concludes my items for this evening.
Thank you, Mr. Goldbeck. We're going to move on to our Assistant Superintendent for Human Resources, Mr. McLemore.
Thank you, Madam President. On the Human Resources agenda, I have items 8.1 through 8.20 for your consideration on tonight.
Would any member like to separate out any of these items? Yes, sir.
8.17, please.
8.17?
Yes.
Thank you. There's a lot of reverb, so I apologize. Anybody else want to separate out any items? Okay. I'd like to entertain a motion on all but 8.17, please.
Second.
Questions or discussion on those items? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Levinstein?
Yes.
Ms. Maida? Yes. Ms. Mineo?
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron?
Yes.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Ms. Burton?
Yes.
Ms. Green?
Yes.
Dr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mr. Howard?
We're going to move on to item 8.17. I'd like to entertain a motion, please. Yes, Mr. Stridiron?
I'd like to table item 8.17, please.
I need a second.
I'll second.
Roll call to table?
Ms. Maida? No. Ms. Mineo?
No.
Mr. Stridiron? Yes. Mr. Walker?
No.
Ms. Burton? No. Ms. Green?
Yes.
Dr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mr. Howard? No. Mr. Levinstein?
No.
That item failed.
Okay, so we have a motion on the floor. Any questions or comments on that item? Yes, sir, Mr. Stridiron.
Does this person meet the standard for qualifications for having the school building leader certification as per the posting on February 10th, 2022?
Mr. Forget, who would you like to answer that, please?
Mr. McLemore?
Thank you, Mr. Forget. Yes, the person meets the qualifications for an assistant principal.
Yes, Mr. Stridiron.
It's not the question that I asked. The posting says qualifications, school building leader certificate. Does the person have that exact certificate that's on the posting?
Mr. Shaw?
The person has an internship certificate that qualifies for service in that position.
Go ahead.
So we could have had dozens of other people apply for the position that have the interim certificate, but if they looked at this posting, would say, I can't apply for this job because I don't have the school building leader certificate. I only have the internship. How is this possible that we can put a posting out? The person may be a great employee, but we have to follow some kind of standard, or else we're going to have all these other people say, hey, I could have applied for that job too. Why wasn't I allowed that? Why was I shut out of this position? I really feel that this should have been tabled. So I can't understand how we can operate in this manner. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? Yes, Ms. Green.
Did you say Ms. Green? Yes. Oh, okay. Thank you, Madam President. I'm just curious as to how an intern was able to get it and not someone who is not an intern, because an intern means that they are kind of quote-unquote learning the job, as opposed to someone who can step in and be ready to do it. I'm just confused about that. Thank you.
Mr. Shaw, can you help us understand the term interim, please?
The way that that's been implemented in New York State allows the person to perform the full duties of the job, and they may be mentored in doing that.
I understand what an intern is because I'm a retired administrator. I'm just saying that it seems like an intern is getting a position as someone who is really qualified to do it, because intern is not the same as someone who can step in and actually do it.
Thank you. Are there any other questions or discussion on this item? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Ms. Mineo?
Yes.
Mr. Stridiron?
No.
Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Ms. Burton?
Yes.
Ms. Green?
No.
Dr. Henderson?
No.
Mr. Howard? Yes. Mr. Levinstein?
Yes.
Ms. Maida? That item passes.
That concludes my items, Madam President. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McLemore. Before we move on from the Human Resources section, I want to welcome Mr. Jeff Woody to our family. And I want to say thank you to Dr. Pedro Roman. This is his last board meeting. Thank you. We're going to move on to the clerk of the board, Mr. McCoy.
Thank you, Madam President. I have items 9.1 and 9.2 on consent.
Would any member like to separate out any of these items? Okay. Roll call. Did I? Wait, I'd like to entertain a motion. I think I need to do that first. Questions or discussion? Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Stridiron? Yes. Mr. Walker?
Yes.
Ms. Burton? Yes. Ms. Green?
Yes.
Dr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mr. Howard? Mr. Levinstein?
Yes.
Ms. Maida?
Yes.
Ms. Mineo?
Yes.
Item 9.3 is the potential Board of Education information packets are available. If you're interested in running for the board, the 3 seats that are up are currently held by Dr. Henderson, Carol Maida, and Mr. Darren Stridiron. If you're interested in running for the board, you need to get 100 signatures of the qualified voters of the school district, and they'll need to be turned into the office of the district clerk by April 27th at 5 p.m. That concludes my items, Madam President.
We're now at the portion of the agenda for public discussion on non-agenda items. Please refer to the procedure sheet. Mr. McCoy, do we have somebody that's going to speak on non-agenda items?
You have somebody in the virtual waiting room, Mr. David Keenan, and that's the only person that signed up to speak, ma'am. We're all ready for you, Mr. Keenan.
Hey, how are you? I'm an alumni of NFA, so I'm very proud of the school and everything is done over the years. And, nothing I say is meant to be negative or against the school at all. My daughter transferred into Newburgh in 10th grade. And my concern at the time when she transferred in was being treated equally. Walk Hill is a school that has an unweighted grade, and she transferred in with that unweighted grade, and I spoke to the guidance counselor and said that the grade should be weighted, as all Newburgh kids are, and she should be treated equal. At the time, she said, well, we'll think about it, and I'll talk and find out. I never heard back, and this is in 10th grade. Nothing happened, and as the years got on, and I got more concerned because they had her number 29 after, when she entered the school, number 17 after 10th grade, number 6 after 11th grade, and I've been trying to, since October, to find out where she stands now. But my point is not so much where she stands, but being treated equally. Newburgh kids took honors in 8th for math and English, and also for their 9th grade courses were weighted. I just feel my daughter should be weighted equally, as she was in Walk Hill High School, which is equivalent to Newburgh, and I think her transfer should reflect that. I've spoke with other administrators throughout the state, and they said that's what they normally do. As is, if she were to transfer back to Walk Hill and take some of her grades which are above 100, they would unweight them and put her back to where she should be with her normal grade. That was my main point for getting on the agenda tonight. I actually called yesterday. I didn't anticipate being in a meeting tonight. There's some other concerns I would like to speak with some board members about. I don't think it's appropriate for me to share them here. I'm not looking to make them public at this time, but I would like to be able to contact some board members and speak with them about certain things that have been on throughout this year with my daughter and other students at the NFA. And that's really my concern for tonight.
Thank you, sir. Have a nice evening.
Thank you.
Boy, I want to wait till he turns it off. Okay, we'll try it again. It's not so reverbing. Would anybody in the audience like to speak on non-agenda items? If not, I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn this meeting, please. Roll call, Mr. Clerk.
Mr. Walker?
As protest, no.
Ms. Burton? Yes. Ms. Green? sorry, Dr. Henderson?
Yes.
Mr. Howard? Mr. Levinstein?
Yes.
Ms. Maida? Ms. Mineo?
Yes.
Mr. Stridarn?
Thank you, everyone, and good night.